Hey, everybody, we're doing an episode today that deals with race. And some people may not be up for a conversation about that, and we respect it, and this may not be the one for you.
And as a secondary disclaimer, if you haven't listened to the first part of this two-part series, I highly encourage you to go back and listen to part one first before you dive into part two.
For those of you who are interested, stay tuned. We're getting right to it. So question 3, to what extent do you discuss racism in the Chub Chaser or gay community with others in your community? How do their experiences compare to yours? And Armando had a really interesting thing to say about this.
I do have more gay friends. They are not all of them are within the Chub and Chaser community. It's more like just gay friends that I made over the years. And I have not discussed this issue with them. We have discussed like colorism, like how the beauty standards affect the way that we live our lives as gay men, but we haven't given that much weight to racism. This is like the first time that I'm like kind of expressing it to somebody else. And it's kind of scary. Like it took me a while to make this recording. I've been overthinking it, and this is the third recording I make. It's not an easy thing, because like I also don't want to, I don't want to put it out in the world as if my experiences are global. I know they are not, but hopefully another guy that looks like me, it's gonna hear this and be like, oh, you know what, that also happened to me. And maybe we can start having a bigger conversation.
It feels indicative of not wanting to confront people you're close to, or feel like you're confronting people you're close to with something uncomfortable, which I feel like also, not that it's his job to do this, I'm not saying that, but the fact that that is the case on everybody's part makes it easy to just let issues that are issues remain issues. Yeah. And I feel like that's part of what we've been trying to do, but also that collectively as a culture, many people have been trying to do is just, it's that idea of educate yourself.
Yeah. Right? And
just
MJ,
have the conversation.
MJ, whom we'll hear from a little later on, has a very different take on the same question.
Why don't we take a listen to that now?
My name is MJ. I live in Washington, D.C., and I identify as Black or either African American. I use both pretty interchangeably. In terms of speaking directly with someone about it, I can relay a story of how a group of friends of mine, we were all traveling together, kind of not doing we're all a group of friends, so there's not a lot of hookups between the traveling friends, but just out of the blue, one of my chaser friends came up to me and said, his dick goes down around black chubs. He's only attracted to white chubs. And it wasn't like we were flirting or that there was any chance of there being any kind of hookup between us. So it really kind of came out of the blue. And it caused a kind of a mini rift in our group of friends because we got into that whole, well, that's just his preference thing. It's not racist. And a lot of the other side of the argument with my friends were, it was out of the blue. No one really asked him. No one was trying to come on to him. So it's kind of going out of your way to create problems where there were none. So I guess in terms of wanting to talk about it, I think it's something that you have to address head on with whether it be someone you're interested in or with your friend group or whatever. But I don't know, at some point you're not going to change anyone's mind. So you have to kind of protect yourself in these situations, if that makes any sense.
And that's, having said what I just said, that is the danger of conversations like this, where even if it even if it doesn't become a blow up, it will challenge your perception of each other. And it might be fine and it might not.
Yeah, I mean, I remember this. It's not racial, so I feel like I have some standing in the question. It was rumored that one of my friends was a Trump supporter, and my reaction was, I do not wish to investigate this claim. Like, if it's not come up in my interaction with them, I don't want to go looking for that, because then I feel like I'd have to, like, that would be a thing between us, and I don't want there to be a thing between us. So I'm just going to keep going until it becomes a problem. And I don't know, is that sweeping it under the rug? Is that burying my head in the sand? Is that trying to keep a friend and not wanting to know stuff that I don't know? What do you guys think?
I mean, I saw an interesting article and it was talking about, obviously the past year, white people have had to confront a lot that society at large has not dealt with, and about having these uncomfortable discussions. And as a white person, like the whole, like, I'm not racist thing, like, it's like the foundation of this country is racist, and therefore kind of there is this, like, this rot that has moved through everything and touched everything and shaped. I mean,
just because you don't understand it doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
And it's not about denying it. It is about accepting that you have to grow and that you have made mistakes and you need to learn from these mistakes. And I mean, in the case of MJ, like, that is like, I don't, you said the friendship is forever tainted. And to touch on what Armando said about, it having difficulty recording and talking about it. Like, I mean, that was one of my big things with this episode, is just like, not just, I don't feel like I can speak on the experience of people of color experiencing racism in the Chub Chaser community. Like, obviously that's its own thing, but being afraid of making a mistake in doing this episode, because I mean, being aware that I have been doing work as time has gone on, but there's always more work for me to do as a white person. And I think just that is uncomfortable, but just kind of being in the discomfort of that reality.
Yeah. So what really helped me was last year I worked on a video for the chorus called, it was within a month or so of the George Floyd murder, and worked on a video where we interviewed many people of color. And one of the things that came back several times was just acknowledging that there's something to work on and saying I'm going to try is a huge show of faith.
Yes.
That should, and this isn't necessarily true in the internet culture of immediate vilification, but within personal relationships, that, and I feel comfortable in saying this because these aren't actually my words, these are the words of people of color that I've talked to, that should, as long as you follow through and as long as you're being genuine, that should buy you the room and the space to do the work you need to do in the time that you need to do it. Like, as long as you mean it and as long as you're doing that, that is a start. And I think it's important because the idea of like not wanting to act on something until you know how to do it perfectly, that's not how you learn and grow in any context. That's not how you get better at something. And I think that it's more important for us to try and get better at something, better at being less racist, even if we don't think that we're inherently or racist, like you are, and you have to work on that. And you're not going to be perfect at it from the start. You're going to have to try, and you're going to probably fail at some point, and you're going to have to try and make good on that and like do the work, but not like avoiding doing that, or like in our case, avoiding this podcast, which we weren't avoiding it. We just were very careful. We could have just pushed it off indefinitely, but I think it's important to take it on, try our best. Hopefully we don't step in it. If we do, also, hopefully people will call us on it so that we can learn from that, because that's the point. Like, we won't be perfect, but we can try.
Right.
and we can
Like, for example, like
learn
I
from our
wanted to do
mistakes.
an episode on race. That was one of the first things that I brought up in our conversations about the show. And we were not provoked into doing it until the Black Lives Matter thing happened. It was just something we kept pushing back. We never really talked about it after that, you know?
Well, and I think it bears saying, like, that we talked about this episode. We didn't know how to do it. I mean, for me, how am I going to talk about that when, you know, I'm on a particular side of that, and it's the side that is not the side that needs more voice.
Yep. And that's one thing. That's one trend that I'm disliking seeing in the racial conversation in this country, is to be overly condemning of people when they're trying to do the right thing. You know, someone's trying to do something good, they make a misstep, and they get called out just as though they were being a racist crapper, you know, racist piece of crap.
Yeah.
And that's not okay. You know, that's going specifically into what Michael just said. The same way that people will have to try to do things and fail and then try again in order to get things right, societies work that way too. Like today, we make fun of people who say the phrase, "I don't see color," right? We know how freaking ridiculous that is to say in this day and age. But when that first started getting bandied around, that was actually an evolution from where people were at the time. That was better than what was going on in the moment, where people were seeing color and going out and trying to kill you because of it, you know?
Or even, I don't.
But now we've evolved, and we know that's bad, and we're on the next stage. I'm sorry, Trevor, I interrupted.
Or even the phrase, like, I don't care if you're, you know, white, black, or purple, which, was it Kristen, not Kristen Chenoweth, not Kristen Stewart, Kristen Bell.
Okay.
Kristen Bell wrote a children's book about, like, the purple people or something, which, like, an attempt was made. I think it just is kind of like, if that had been, I don't know, like 3 years earlier, it would have landed better.
Yeah.
Right.
I will say, we, you know, we're talking about how uncomfortable these discussions can be, but Will and John kind of had similar experiences.
My name is Will. I live in Orlando, Florida, and I am African American. Again, you do encounter some people who would say, like, oh, I prefer white guys over black guys, or I prefer black guys over white guys. And some people might perceive that as a form of racism. I don't know if I have. I don't know if I really felt like it was or not.
Hi, I'm John. I'm living in London, and I identify as Eurasian. I honestly haven't spoken to many guys about race before, because in the Chub Chaser world, it's mainly about size. And my friends in the gay community also don't speak about race because it doesn't really come up at all.
I think what's interesting about both of these is, you know, like we were talking about, like how how confronting it can be to have these conversations, but I think they can also end up being kind of mundane, or in the case of John, it may cause you to look at different aspects of bias or, I guess attraction.
Right.
Well, I mean, I think it goes back to talking about particular, like you, Don, you were talking about jawlines, and I think that reflects what John is saying about how, you know, they're talking about size or hairiness or age, and yeah, any race can play in that game. Yeah. Like every race has an age, every race has hairiness, every race has size. So it becomes not about race. It's still about. You can say it's still objectifying. You can still it's a focus on physical characteristics. But you know, we do that. We have that component to our sexuality.
There's a context.
Yeah. But what's interesting is that I think when you try to when you are looking at these racial characteristics, it's almost like this game of whack-a-mole, where like, well, what is it you're actually objecting to? You know? Yeah.
I think so. Something that's helped as we've been talking, I've been forming a thought here, and this is a new thought, so bear with me. Because this has always been something that I've wondered about, and it's, you know, if somebody said to me, you know, well, you say you're a chaser, you only date and sleep with fat guys, but like, you know, how can that really be true? Shouldn't you just be able to like find the beauty in all people? And having slept with thin guys before. And even not that fat guys who are not thin either, like, it makes a difference. And so I was thinking like, okay, but there's more to it than that. And it's something that Dan has said, which is that there is a huge range of physical characteristics, even within that descriptor of fat in quotes.
Yeah.
For me, like that covers a very broad range of body types and sizes, even though it starts at a certain place. And I think in the same way, like it took experience from me to understand more about that range. Like that range started in a specific place and grew over time. And I think in the same way, if you challenge your perception of what you think initially, like Don was saying, that can also expand from maybe the one race you're initially interested in, but you can challenge that and that can grow sideways. There can be more inclusion if you challenge yourself and give yourself a chance to have those experiences instead of just living in this, closet of denial about what your attraction is.
And for me, like there is a whole lot of things that makes me attracted to a guy, and they don't have to have all of them. I mean, in fact, they may have none of some of them. But
Sure.
my joke is like, he wasn't that fat, but he was just so goddamn handsome. It's like, I'm sorry, there's what I find is there's something there that, and sometimes it's personality.
Sure.
That just like, I just want to be in bed with that personality. Like you sound really fun. I had that happen to me. I found myself in bed with a martial artist who was not at all fat, and we had a great time. It was fun. It's just not where it was fun. It wasn't sexual. It was fun.
You can have a great time like that. It's not necessarily, I've been there before. And I've also been on the other side of like having a very bad time. But that was because it wasn't addressed up front. It was sort of like, the guy that I was with didn't know that I was like primarily into chubs. And so that it just became this awkward thing of like trying and failing.
No, I mean, that was one of the things. Like he and I had dinner together. We were driving back to, we weren't sure where, like where are we going to take this next? He put his hand on my knee and I said like, well, I have something I should probably tell you.
A warning.
And that was the problem. It was a stage of my sexual development where, a guy smiles at you and picks you up at a Starbucks and they go, hi, how are you? And you go like, I don't date guys like you. I don't never have sex with you. Like, that's not your next line.
Yeah.
So when do you say that? Over dinner? When do you, and so it was at this point where I said like, so I got to tell you, I usually like really fat guys. You were obviously like that. And I think you're great, but I just want to warn you that I don't think this will go anywhere particularly sexually. And he was very wonderful. He just had a big smile on his face. He's like, that's okay. Let's see what happens. I'm like, what? Forewarned, forearmed. Let's go.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think
that's a good response too.
Yeah. All right. Do we want to get to question 4?
Yeah. Is there anything about being a chub or chaser that compounds your experience of racism? Do you think racism is worse in the chub chaser community than in the gay community or its society at large?
Society is large. I think racism is just an issue in general. I think the biggest thing is that it's become so ingrained in the American culture, not just in the community, as it just in society as a whole, that it seems so normalized. And some people might do it without realizing it is a form of racism. Within the gay community, I wouldn't be surprised. Again, personally, I've been very lucky, or that the fact that I just haven't associated too much directly hardcore with the community, that I've felt like I've encountered it. If I have, I might have just seen it as it's someone's preference or not. Who knows? Again, it's not necessarily something that I might pay attention to a lot. I mean, growing up, I was pretty much a quiet person to begin with. So from a social standpoint, I'm still kind of a quiet person to a degree. And I don't have a large social group. I usually have a lot of acquaintances. But I try to keep a lot of friend circles relatively small, just because I think it becomes a little heavy at times if you have so many people. But I do like to interact with a good amount of people. And I guess I've just been lucky that I haven't really felt like I've encountered any sort of heavy racism within my social circles within the community. But do I feel like being a Chub or Chaser compounds that experience? I think it can for some people. I know I've seen some like people who fetishize being chubby or being into chubs, and sometimes that can devolve into some kind of racism. But I don't really think I've experienced that personally. If someone else has, obviously that is a terrible experience, but I myself have been, again, extremely lucky and pushing almost 40 years old to not have really encountered anything too hardcore in that aspect.
Well, like I said before, I think that the Chub Chaser community is mostly about size rather than race. Although I have met a few chasers who would say that they prefer white chubs, which I am clearly not. But then on the other hand, you also get chasers who are into hairy or older chubs, which I'm also not. So I think race comes into play along with other factors of attraction as well.
Both of them feel like it's an element, but it's not an overly powerful element.
Yeah, and I talk to a lot of chubs and chasers who find certain physical characteristics far more, shall we say, prejudicial, like working in your favor or against you than racism in particular, at least no more so than society at large.
Yeah, which maybe that speaks more to how racist our society is.
Exactly. I mean, that's kind of what they're saying. I think one of our respondents says that, it's the Chub Chaser community is a sample of the gay community, which is a sample of the larger community.
Yeah.
And so, you can find racism in all these samples.
Intersectionality.
Though I do wonder, it's sort of, again, there's this hierarchy of shittiness, right? Where I will tend to assume when someone is shitty to me, it's because I'm fat, not because I'm brown.
Yeah.
That's my assumption. I could be wrong. They could be being shitty to me because I'm brown. Who knows?
Why not both, Don?
Makes everything better.
Well, and
there's definitely an element of like, it's very vocally unacceptable to be racist in our society, even though people still are. It's at least acknowledged that it's not okay. Well, at least until Trump became president. Whereas I think being fat phobic is still totally cool, and everybody can do that.
I do feel like people who are anti whatever I am, brown or fat, like I think because I'm an intersection, right, that they feel like it's more okay for them just to be free with their tongue, right? If I was just fat or just brown, they might be a little bit more prone to hold their tongues on certain bullcrap that they do. But because that's a complete supposition. I do not have any empirical evidence to support that, but that's my personal belief.
I mean, I think there is something to, as fat people, whatever other community we go into, usually they're fine with being horrible to you because you're fat.
Yeah.
Right.
It's fat phobia will unite the world if we let it. And I think that's, I don't know. I think that's just one of the things that I find so frustrating, and I feel so much for the chubs that we got responses from, because it's, I mean, I already said this. You feel like you're going into a space where you're like, finally, I found my people.
Yep.
And it's like, oh, actually, no, people are still shitty here. Like, it's just this, I mean, the trifecta of, you're black, but you're gay. So then you're in the gay community and it's like, oh, you're fat. And then you go, okay, so I'm in the Chub Chaser community and, oh, you're black. And then it's, this game that is unwinnable just because people are shitty.
It looks like Robert agrees with you.
And do you think racism in Catholic community is large? I do think the gay community in general probably have way bigger issues, and especially like West Hollywood is a good example, right? They are very sizes. If you go against White Hollywood as a big person, they generally is not kind, and I think it's very wrong. And in many ways, but this is part we need to educate the society in general. But in many ways, I mean, I do think in terms of the gay community and society in general, obviously evangelicals, there's a lot of different groups for different reasons. Evangelicals are also being hypocritical since they don't care what topic they talk to these days. And so I think this is definitely a bigger problem in the other, general community, in the gay community in general, our society at large. We should address them. But in terms of just asking Chub Chaser whether it's worse, no, I do think since we value each other significant enough that we will actually reduce such interaction with being racism, everything else. It doesn't say it doesn't exist, but I think it's actually racial-wise, it probably statistically has less.
That's a very interesting point. And I wonder, I don't know if I'm qualified to comment.
You're allowed to comment.
I mean, sizeism in the mainstream gay community seems so it's like encouraged almost. It's not even just accepted. It's like
it's part of the culture. It's just ironed into it.
It's intrinsic to the culture.
It's beyond our culture. Yeah. It's part of our industry. Literally. Like propping up sizeism is part of the economic lifeblood of this country. Between food management, food advertising, food banning,
I would
go
go even farther down. I think it's probably an even greater proportion of the gay economy if you think about it.
Oh, yeah. Enormously, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I wonder if it's almost like, because the gay community is still, granted, we're getting there, maybe more so than other communities, but still like striving to be accepted in the mainstream. If it's like we have to kind of put our quote in massive air quotes, our best foot forward to reach acceptance. It's like anything that doesn't look like, the pretty white gay guy is like, get out of here. Like we can't represent ourselves that way. Like we have to.
But I mean, we're, of course the gay community is still trying to be accepted. We're still trying to get, cops to stop killing people because they're black. Like it's
like what state was it where they just legalized ignoring gay people when they're injured?
Oh, Texas.
Whoa.
Texas. Yeah. Like paramedics no longer have to treat someone as they're bleeding out in the street if they think they're gay.
Yeah. If they would have a religious problem with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm sorry, Trevor. Did I interrupt you?
No, it's just I am just kind of dumbfounded by everything.
Dumbfounded by the dumb. Yeah.
Yes.
There is there is a bunch of assumptions that land on me because I'm a chubby chaser that don't land on chubs, and that's just because of a bunch of things. And I think Corin's point here about how it affects him as a black chaser is really interesting.
Yes, absolutely. Chasers are already oftentimes seen as the pursuers or aggressors, the active one in a chub chaser relationship. A lot of folks in the gay community grew up watching creepy interracial porn that talks about some hypermasculine, like black brute with a 20 BBC inch genitals, which ravages someone, and it shows. These two assumptions get compounded together, and it leads to folks having some wild assumption about the type of partner I'd be and what they want me to do to them. And what's so maddening about it is that black men, this like idea that black men are hyper masculine aggressors is literally what gets us murdered by cops. So folks trying to sexualize that is beyond disgusting. I don't think that racism is necessarily worse in the chub chaser community than the gay community or society at large, but I will say it's worse because I expect more, essentially, especially from chubs, because chubs have to deal with being maligned and assumptions made about them all the time in a very fatphobic society. So for them to weaponize vicious stereotypes of another group of people towards folks in their own community, I think that's sad, and they should know better.
He has a really strong way of putting that.
It's beautiful. It's really eloquently put.
It's incredible. Yeah. It's perfectly put, and it is incredibly potent. And I think he says it perfectly.
Yes.
I don't know that
there's nothing to add to that. Yeah.
Question 5. What would you say to someone encountering similar problems in the chub chaser community? What actions or mindset do you think is helpful? And we'll hear from MJ first.
The first thing I would say is to remind the person that our community is no different than our larger society. Some people won't like you because of your race, your looks, your socioeconomic status, your background, your weight, smoothness or hairiness. And as unfair or stupid as that might be, you're not likely to change their minds by arguing about it. I think you have to live your life. You need to find your chosen family and be open minded when someone outside of your normal likes shows an interest in you. You could be missing out on a great friendship connection, or even if there's not a sexual attraction. And you're in your own way, you're fighting those same stereotypes by giving people a chance and finding out if you can expand your circle of what you find attractive.
Yeah, what MJ's saying here is perfectly valid and correct as a self-care method. But that said, it is a self-care reaction. This is it's not a way to fix things.
Well,
yeah, but the question is about, if someone's going through this, what do you suggest? And so I think a self-care answer is perfectly legitimate. Does it solve the problem? No, of course it doesn't.
Yeah.
But it also speaks to Trevor's thing about, you're a fat black gay guy and you come out to the gay community and all of a sudden the size door gets slammed in your face, or the black door gets slammed in your face, and like, where are you supposed to go? And MJ's answer is, well, you find your people.
It's what we were talking about before. Like, you find people with similar intersections.
Mm-hmm.
Again, not the same life experience, but they're probably going to have a better chance of understanding what you're going through.
Well, I'm not sure he's saying find other people like you. I think he's saying find where you're accepted.
Yeah, find your clan. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. And to the people who are prejudiced, the request that when somebody outside of your normal interest expresses interest in you, be open-minded about it. And I think this is what I was saying earlier, but just the idea that you can choose to be open-minded. Like, there is no predetermined, thing. And it may not go, like, you may discover that, no, this is still a thing for whatever reason, and I still have work to do, or maybe I don't want to do that work or whatever, but you can still choose to be open-minded about it from the get-go.
I mean,
not.
calling back to what I said before, I've been in bed with a guy and some aspect of their physicality just does not work for me, but other stuff does, and let's go with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can choose.
Let's dive into Armando. He has some pretty thoughtful stuff here.
To me, the biggest problem with racism within the Chub Chaser community, it's representation. Like, if I go to a pool party or if I go to an event, I see mostly like white people. I see very few brown people like myself, and it just makes me insecure. I immediately know, like, arriving at the event, that oh no, like, I'm a minority here, and that's not the purpose, because when you go to an event, you just want to like express yourself. But then I have this other layer on top of me that is like, oh no, like, most of these guys are white, like, and it's just, I have that preconceived thing that's going to be an issue, and then that's a problem in it. That's a problem because I shouldn't have this burden on myself. Like, it's not up to the minorities to always be defending themselves, or like I don't need to justify my existence in these spaces. I don't need to come up with a grand argument of why I deserve to be there or why I deserve to be part of the community. So my advice would be to just kind of look within yourself first and see where these insecurities are coming from. Try to gather some tools so that you can point it out in the moment. Like, if something happens at a bar or with your friends, you can have, or at least articulate some, like, your feelings so that the conversation can start.
Yeah, like MJ, I think there's some strong self-help advice here.
Yeah, I mean, he makes two really good points. One is that, the gay community stereotypically, or even not so stereotypically, the gay community is real white. If I walk out into West Hollywood, if I go into the gay neighborhoods, there's a whole lot of white people there. And that's just that phenomenon. But then he talks about how, as a person of color in that environment, he starts to question his legitimacy in that place, in that space, and to sort of, for himself, trying to interrupt that behavior, interrupt those thoughts.
Right. And not let that take your voice away,
Yeah.
which I think is, if you feel like you're alone in a space,
It's hard to keep a
that
voice. Absolutely.
yeah, it's hard. It's like you, and when you do speak, you're suddenly not just speaking for yourself, but for everyone else who's not in that room with you. That can be quite a lot to feel like you have to do if you open your mouth to speak or stand up for yourself. And I think, I don't know, I haven't been to an event before. I suspect that just based on photos and like videos that I've seen around, like obviously that seems like it's quite isolating to show up and not look like everybody else, even if there are a bunch of different body types there.
I think, I've been to a number of events, and I think, while, like, I think a lot, the gay community, it can be, it is an overwhelming sea of pale white bodies, especially in the, the Vegas sun at Bigger Vegas. It can be blinding if you
Soon to be red.
look out in the afternoon. But I think that should never I think you should never be trying to never be stopped by that, because I think it is, I think at least the Chub Chaser events I've been to are very welcoming, but I can understand the feeling
And maybe now this is a question as far, again, I've never been to an event before, but just as far as behaviors therein, which is kind of what you're talking about, like, is this something where as part of that awareness discussion, like asking people to just actively take steps to be welcoming to people who look like they're by themselves, is that good or bad? Is that like confronting, or is that taking action in a place that maybe in a moment that could use a little bit of an impetus?
It's funny.
It would be helpful. I have gone to Chub or Chaser events in the past and then found no conversations because nobody would break the ice with me. And when I tried to break ice with other people, they were evasive.
Yeah. And usually what that comes down to, there could be a whole lot of fear in the room. Mm-hmm. There can be a whole lot of insecurity. And the Chasers are at least, if not more, guilty about this than Chubs, because we get real scared in those environments for a number of other reasons. Because remember, the Chubs are in the majority. So we're sort of the odd men out, and we're dealing with a bunch of stuff. Again, not an excuse, just sort of an explanation. But my point is that a lot of times what comes off as bad or rude behavior is just blind stinking fear, because it's a very strange environment at an event. But I will say this: however you are at any party is how you're going to be at an event times 10, just because there's more. It's just more. It's just the volume's turned up. So if you're the kind of person who at a party will go around and make friends and talk to everybody and make sure everybody's included, guess what? You're going to do that at an event that has 800 people at it. You're just going to do that because it's what you do. And if you're the kind of guy who stands in the corner and tends not to talk to people, well, you're just going to do that even more at a bigger event, unless you make a change about that. Like you're not condemned to that, but I'm just telling you, if you want to know how it's probably going to go, that's how it's probably going to go.
I'm realizing that, once again, the major Gemini power here, I am both like introducing people to other people and like, I don't know, maybe once or twice making out with someone I just met in a pool, or, in the bushes eating pizza crusts, hissing at people as they pass by.
We have the photos. Yeah, it's a very mixed bag. And this isn't a show about the events, but just so you know, events are scalable. There are big events, there are small events. We should do a show on events. This isn't it. But there's a lot to say.
Coming this summer.
I think Sean has a good way of wrapping this up.
Just like I said before, you are not crazy. This is an issue that we have to deal with. We have to, once again, combat it one step at a time. Find your friends out there that you can talk to, that you can chat and bitch and have a bitch session and
And, just know that, things will change one day. You just have to take it one step at a time. But you are not crazy, and we, I have to remind myself of that. I'm not crazy. I'm a beautiful man, and things will happen for me as they will happen for you.
Thank you, Sean. Advice we can all live by.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Question 6. Okay, here's the open-ended one, you bastard.
Our last question.
Yeah.
What have we not asked you? What have we not asked that you feel is important to say?
It's the whole, I'm not racist, it's just my preference. I've heard that a million times, and I usually avoid having that argument with people because, again, I don't think you're going to change anyone's mind. So one of the problems I have with that is that those sentiments sometimes come from people within our community who will self-describe themselves, although they may be gay, white, or other men of another race other than black. They will accept the black culture with their slang or dress or the descriptions of themselves, but not accept the people themselves in terms of being worthy to date. So I think that is a problem that we have in pretty much our group and the gay community at large. So that's just something that always has bugged me, I guess.
There are people who view people like sex object, right? I mean, when people look through them like pictures of other people, I generally look like would discuss what the person, what their life is, where do they live, what do they do, some kind of interesting. Oh, what their name is. A lot of people get their dick sucked, doesn't even ask them for a name. And but in many ways, I think that is a little defaming, right? I think there is value for us to recognize each other as a human being instead of about the object. Again, yes, ours is a fetish about something like a dump and load, but at the bigger picture here, we do need to foster a better culture for everybody to talk to each other, be candid. You can like a certain thing or don't like certain thing, right? There's subdivision between Chub Chaser and the Bear for Bear and stuff like that. But at the same time, we need to be, just really have this conversation because there's always something in common, even most extreme people. We just need to find the common thread between our humanity, trying to foster this conversation. And what's very important about this is that's why you can't simply focus on one aspect, especially sex, right? Again, sex is good and it's important for gay community, and it's not saying it's not something to do, but purely focusing on that is not really trying to build anything, right? I think it's important, A, ask people for a name at least, and B, and then try to get to know them. It's fascinating everybody's story, right? Obviously a lot of people suffer from different things from their childhood, from different kind of trauma, but this is why we need to be a human being, have compassion about other people's opinion, but really in order to get there, you need to listen to them to get to know them first.
White supremacy in general, I feel like we need to say it out loud, is something that manifests itself in so many different ways. It's not just extremist, violent, hateful speech. It's the small things, in my mind, that really put us in a place that is ultimately more dangerous for everyone. Especially for Black, Indigenous, and people of color, especially within the queer community.
God, this might sound really cliche, but life is short. Try not to be a dick to somebody. Just because, everyone comes from different walks of life. Everyone has a different sort of story to tell. And one is not any less valid than the other. So treat people the way you want to be treated. Doesn't matter if you're Black or white or Hispanic or Asian or any sort of any race or gender identification or whatever. Really, it boils down to be kind to each other.
What's more to add to what more can we possibly add to that?
Yeah, maybe we don't.
Yep.
Yeah.
So thanks to everybody who wrote in
Yes.
or even sent us some recordings.
Mm-hmm.
We really appreciate it. We are holding on to them, and in the future we may.
So we got so much more than what we were able to fit into this episode, but that is not lost effort. We've made a determination. We're not 100% locked into the format yet, but continuing to include both these recordings and future ones, we're going to continue to ask people things like this, and find a way to include voices that need to be heard on the show.
And don't
going
feel
forward.
like you need to wait to be asked. If you've got something you would like to record and send in to us,
absolutely.
we are happy to listen to it, and you may make it onto the show.
Yeah. And especially in this case, I mean, certainly for the people who've already written us for this, I don't want to guarantee people a spot on the show, but certainly if it feels like in this case it's quite important to put in, absolutely. And then we'll certainly listen to everything that you guys send and try and fit it into a spot that amplifies your message.
Trevor, do we have a tip for the day?
Yes, we do. So I believe I've shared this before when it's opened up, but NAFA, the National Association to Advance Fat Acceptance, has been doing quarterly Fat Community Project grants, which is basically you can, if you have, maybe you want to put together a fat acceptance, kind of fat activism-y pool party, or maybe a community game night.
So it's a one-time grant to advance fat acceptance and fat oppression, correct?
Yes, and but specifically for community projects. It could also be maybe you want to do a photography project, maybe a workshop, maybe where they also do projects with other anti-oppression causes. Examples include maybe if you want to organize a group to attend a Black Lives Matter protest, a float for a local pride parade, all sorts of stuff. I will share how you can check out information about this. It's a sliding scale for the amounts. It depends how many applications they get and approve. So it can be anywhere from $50 to $500,
Nice.
depending on...
I have an idea for one that I want to...
Do you want to apply or you want to give it away?
That I would want to apply for. It wouldn't have to be much, but I think it would be cool to do like a short form documentary about some aspect of the Chub Chase community, at like interviewing people at an event. Not out in the event, but just talking to people one-on-one. And kind of like what I do for a living. I mean, it's mini documentaries, but I think it would be fun to do that. It would be my first experience at an event, and I would get to hide behind a camera, so I wouldn't have to, I could, sorry, I'm shooting, I'm busy. It's again,
Well,
that's how I am.
You have until April 30th to do your application. And the award letters
few
are
weeks.
sent out on May 15th. Let us know your ideas for a fat community project you'd like to do. We're on Instagram and Twitter as @BigFatGayPod. We're on Facebook as The Big Fat Gay Podcast. Leave us 5 stars there. Leave us 5 stars and a review on Apple Podcasts. See the articles we mentioned at www.bigfatgaypod.com. I again just want to thank everyone who wrote in and shared their responses to our questions.
Yeah.
This episode would not have been possible at all without you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, everybody.
So, we're just grateful. Nothing to watch out for this week, unless, I don't know, maybe Michael's going to say, watch out now.
You know what? No. Today, nobody has to watch out for anything.